Tom Standage's The Writing on the Wall, Social Media, the First 2,000 Years is an interesting book that explores the communicative nature of humanity. The latest social media boom has been criticized as isolating people, especially teenagers, from reality or destroying face-to-face communication. Standage, however, refutes this argument in 250 pages that inform the reader that yes, people have always been like this. The technology has increased with the time, but the principles of communication largely remain the same. Of course, as he also points out, there have always been people who were opposed to the newest technologies of writing. Cicero wasn't, but one of his most famous quotes is, "Times are bad, children no longer obey their parents, and everyone is writing a book." Standage ties almost every older writing technology to current technologies, and this quote is relatable today because the same sentiments are still heard to this day. The book starts 2,000 some years ago in ancient Rome, and starts off with Marcus Tullius Cicero. A social networking guru, Cicero was entangled in a web of contacts and information, his own form of the internet, if you will. Standage goes on to explain in depth the social networking system of the Romans, including the texts they sent each other on wax tablets. The book, which mostly follows a chronological and geographical order, jumps forward in time to Martin Luther and from there to Henry VIII's court, Elizabeth I's court, the old-fashioned Starbucks, or rather coffee houses, several revolutions, the death of social media, and its resurrection. Each chapter of his book focuses on a new place, time, and form of communication that developed. Describing the gap between Rome and Luther, the New York Times review of Standage's book states, "Literacy fell with the Roman Empire. For all but the ecclesiastical elite, media took a 1,000-year holiday. Not until the advent of the printing press did people have much reason to read again. Once they did," Standage says, "their behavior reverted to that of the early Romans." Standage writes repeatedly about pamphlets over the years, stating that both Martin Luther and later Thomas Paine went viral as people shared, commented on, and liked the ideas behind these written exchanges. The most interesting aspects of pamphlets which he covers, though, were the comments made about them and the attempted restrictions on their publication. Standage writes about a system of publishing and reacting with pamphlets. When one writer would publish, someone else would take sections of their pamphlet and republish it with their own comments or refutation of the ideas presented. Standage relates this to comments on internet threads, in which there is often an original poster of an article, a video, or other comment, and then a long list of secondary commentary. Often, these commenters interact with each other by using the pseudonyms or usernames given, just as with pamphlets. As with commenters today, pamphleteers chose names to separate themselves from their works, as Paine did when he published Common Sense anonymously. Standage also addresses the trend on the internet of dismissing a commenter's post due to misspellings or bad grammar. One opposing pamphlet to Common Sense was described as so badly written that it would only strengthen the cause of independence. We see this today as informed and interesting comments are dismissed for using the wrong form of your or some other common error. The restrictions on pamphlets, however, apply broadly to almost all social media, then and now. Pamphlets, poems, newspapers, and books that were unauthorized sometimes resulted in executions, and the same ideas of censorship are still sometimes seen today. For instance, in his chapter The Rebirth of Social Media, Standage talks about how some social media sites are restricted, censored, or outright banned in some countries. It seems that for as long as social media has existed, some governments have opposed it. Another aspect of social media that Standage writes about is the time-wasting effect of this form of communication. Students today often procrastinate on their work by scrolling through Facebook, Twitter, or watching countless YouTube videos of cats. But in a way, this has always been the case. Standage devotes a chapter to his book on the rise of coffee houses in the mid-17th century and the outcry against them, saying that they were a time sink and that nothing was accomplished by going to a coffee house. On the other hand, according to Standage, Isaac Newton would not have discovered the theory of gravity without the help of coffee and the open discussions found within these shops. Perhaps this is one reason why coffee shops are still so popular. The one section of the book that seems somewhat out of place is Standage's chapter on the death of social media and the rise of mass media. According to Standage, when television, radio, and other pre-planned programming came into being, people stopped using social networks as much. This started with turning newspapers into businesses. Standage says, from a business point of view, the goal of a newspaper was now to gather as large a readership as possible in order to provide an audience for advertisements. Readers were no longer seen as participants in a conversation taking place within the newspaper's pages. Instead, they had become purely consumers of information. Rather than providing a platform for the circulation and discussion of documents created by others, newspapers became vehicles for the delivery of their own reports. Television produced much of the same culture, and this phenomenon of human interaction continued until the rise of the Internet and rebirth of social media. The Guardian sums up their review of Standage's The Writing on the Wall by saying, Standage provides a useful reminder that, however much our material environment changes, our behavior tends to remain the same, and we are social beings. To think that technology is able to alter us fundamentally is to fall into the trap of thinking that machines are somehow alien. They are human creations that reflect our needs and desires. So if the ancients did use their iPad equivalents, it's because they were easily distracted, frivolous, gossipy news junkies with too much to say for themselves, just like us. In short, Standage's book explores the idea that humans, as social creatures, have latched onto social media whenever we could. Graffiti on the walls of Pompeii were the first wall posts, commonplace books were the original Facebook, letters, the original emails, which really isn't a difficult logical leap to follow, and the consumed media is an aberration. Anyone unconvinced of the long history of social media only needs to sit down between Facebook and YouTube time and read Standage's book to be convinced.